Hello, everybody. Welcome to Asymmetric Habits with myself, Jerry Hanley, your nerdy strength coach, and Jonathan Pishner, your super jacked professional counselor. So, your favorite duo of bald headed guys talking about small habits that can have outsized improvements in your life. So, today's topic involves negative circumstances. It's something that we always like to think that we're going to avoid. We do a good job with that or ending, but in life it's hard to we don't have control over all of it, but what we do have control is our ability to tolerate the negative circumstances, or maybe take a voluntary action to leave the circumstances or change what we can. So that's what we're looking at today: is negative circumstances. When you find yourself surrounded by them or confronting them, kind of some strategies to learn, like figure out when would be best to maybe try to tolerate it for a while, when would be best to overcome it completely, or when maybe you should be looking at a bigger change. So I'll hand the reins over to my good friend JP, and he'll go a little bit deeper on today.
Yeah. So what makes this such a passionate topic for me, and I can't remember if I've ever talked to you about this. Most people are surprised when I tell them what the trauma that I treat most often is, because as a trained trauma therapist, obviously I've treated traumas running the gamut of human negative experiences. I've treated just about everything you could imagine, but the one that I've treated the most, I'm going to give you the quiz, just in case I've never told you.
Job
What
fit.
would you get? Yeah, there it is. Okay, so I've told you.
Yep.
The thing that most people are shocked to death by is the trauma I treat the most is bad job fit that went on too long. I treat that more than I treat car crashes, more than I treat childhood sexual abuse, more than I treat veterans with war trauma, all of it. I treat that the most often. Most people don't come in realizing that's what they have. Most people come in with depression or anxiety or substance abuse problems, and that's what's at the root of it. But that's what happens a lot is they'll walk in the door with this other thing, and really it's wear and tear trauma. So that's really what we're talking about today: negative circumstances that have the opportunity to turn into wear and tear trauma. So let me just go ahead and ruin everybody's day pretty immediately, and before we even worry about like what to do about this stuff. The two ways you will get into negative circumstances and talk yourself into staying are either through a job that's the wrong fit or a career that's the wrong fit, or a bad love relationship where you're just not compatible with your partner. Those are the two places where people talk themselves into staying. Most other places, you can kind of convince people to get out of it a little more readily. Those two, a lot of people are very unready to examine whether or not that is the right move for them, because we romanticize the ability to stay in negative circumstances. We romanticize the ability to tolerate suffering. We romanticize the idea of not being a quitter. Mm-hmm. Like there are a lot of talking heads on the internet that talk about not being a quitter, and I would love to line them up and just deliver a punch in the face to a great many of them for this very reason, because they're not putting the qualifier on there of like there's sometimes when quitting is actually the right move. So I realize I kind of moved into a rant right there, but that's why we're talking about this today.
It's a well-deserved rant. It's okay.
Yeah.
And I mean, you're right. Like, I love that you went straight to the psychology of why this is such an issue for people. And it is, because we have this idea of, in this, from constant messaging of you have to persevere, don't quit. Like I said, do what you can, like work harder, longer, all those things, which is ironic because we also have at the same time, in society today, there's a lot of like immediate gratification involved too. So it's almost like it's funny. I'm actually going to pull some psychology in from like an investing world, but it's one of these part of human psychology. It's almost like when looking at something that's going to win, like a positive experience, we're almost looking for instant gratification there. But then if we're stuck in a negative experience, like I said, in a negative circumstance, it's almost like we want to find some sort of justification for staying there. And almost like we want to reach a break even point, or that it was so as people will almost put more into the negative circumstance or more energy into surviving it, persevering it, keep telling ourselves like, oh, well, we'll just try harder. And then what I have like essentially withstood so long will be worth it, rather than just cutting your losses and moving on.
Yep. And, there's very few things I actually use from my psychology undergrad. Usually most of it's from grad school, but there's one, because getting to watch the visual of what you're talking about is so wonderful. We had to do several rat related experiments, and one of them was an experiment on reinforcement. So the whole shtick of it was that you put a rat in a cage and it wanders around and does things. And eventually it figures out that if it presses the little lever, a treat comes out. And so eventually they put them in the cage, they run over and immediately press the lever for the treat. And over the course of time, what you do is you make it so that then they have to press the lever 2 times. Then they have to press the lever 3 times. And they have to press the lever 4 times. And eventually you move to a thing called intermittent reinforcement, where you randomize how often they'll get the treat. And what you'll see is a lot of the rats will run over and just start pounding the lever, and they don't care how long they have to pound it to get the treat. That happens a ton in some of these negative circumstances. People are unwilling to leave because they'll get intermittently reinforced. Right now, if you are watching this in the year that we are putting this out, there are a ton of memes running around the internet about companies giving pizza parties instead of raises.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Now, there is psychology behind this, because this is intermittent reinforcement. They give a little tiny reward, which in the brain becomes outsized, because in a way you're kind of so hungry for like some sort of recognition that this bullshit reinforcement of a pizza party for a lot of people actually is enough to help them stay a little longer and continue to accept negative circumstances like either low pay, crappy supervisors, whatever. So, I mean, people make fun of it a lot, but when you're in that circumstance, that works. It's the exact same reason people have trouble leaving abusive relationships. They'll get abused a ton, and then the person like gives them a little bit of love, or maybe even a lot, and then it causes them to desire to stay. So the thing you're talking about, yes, basically I got to watch that play out with like in a lab setting. And then of course, as I'm trying to help people leave some of these circumstances or decide what to do, I'm watching it play out in real time with real human beings, which is tragic in a way, because they get this little tiny bit of reinforcement and then they're like, no, man, I can't leave. That's, fill in whatever excuse comes after that.
Yeah. Like I've heard of that rat experiment before. It's really neat to hear it. As like put into context in these very common situations with people. So let's start looking into it. Like, you already mentioned wear and tear trauma, which I've heard you bring up before, but I know that's not like a common in lexicon for people. They don't think of things as wear and tear trauma. Like you said, there's the big ones that we typically know of, the relationship, the abusiveness, the drug issues, depression, things like that. But yeah, wear and tear is not one that at least that I've ever seen or talked to like has made its way out there in messaging. Why is that?
And that's because it's not in the DSM. That's actually a good point. Let me point out what I mean when I say wear and tear trauma, because that's kind of a slang term amongst therapists. When we say that, when professionals say that, what we're really referring to, since you won't find this in the DSM, is when somebody goes through a negative circumstance that then starts to produce biological reactions. So you'll have little adrenaline dumps. Like here's a common one. Anybody who's been through a negative circumstance too long recognizes this. Let's make it a job for a second. You're in your car, you're pulling up to the place, you're getting out of your car, you're getting ready to walk in the door. Some people will start to have a biological response. They'll start to sweat a little bit. They'll start to have their heart rate change or their breathing change, they'll start to feel a little tingly. What's happening is they're getting a very small adrenaline dump. Their adrenaline is basically leaking into their system. It's not dumping like they're in a survival situation, but it's leaking into the system because the brain is registering a potential survival response. And what happens with that over time is not only does the adrenaline response get activated and messed up, that over the course of time increases cortisol and a number of other stress response biological difficulties, which start to break down the body. Too much cortisol over too much time literally breaks down the cells of the body. And I'm grossly overgeneralizing for the purpose of trying to make this digestible for people who don't want to hear the nine-hour lecture about it. But that starts to break down. So when we say wear and tear trauma, what we're really talking about is that cascade of effects. Even though it's not a formal diagnosis, most of us who work with this kind of know that that's what is being discussed when we talk wear and tear trauma.
And with conditioning, I would only imagine that, once you in essence almost cross that line of starting to experience real biological effects, then they actually become you actually start experiencing them sooner and easier.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
100%.
It's
Sunday scaries. You ever heard of the Sunday scaries?
No.
The Sunday scaries are for the people who have a Saturday, Sunday weekend, and it's getting towards Sunday evening, and they have the thought of, I got to go to work tomorrow. Suddenly they get that adrenaline leakage. That's the Sunday scaries. That's really what that is. If you get the Sunday scaries, spoiler alert, you are in a tough spot, and it might be time to think about changing circumstances if you can.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. People tend to think that the longer we're in things, we'll get tougher with it. We'll be able to deal with it more, things like that. And just adaptation. And I feel like that's true. That's true to a point. But what I've seen just in my experience, with zero official training, is that if the line is crossed where you do start having actual negative experience it, then that flips and you start experiencing the negative things easier and sooner. Yeah, it can be with work. I've seen it with working out. If you get to a point, or even certain exercises or things like that, where they start giving you too much of a negative effect, maybe you got sick during a certain workout, then if you're going to go do that, you start experiencing that sooner and sooner. And I myself got to a point where I was throwing up before I would squat, before warm-up sets. It was just an automatic, I'm going to go squat. And it would be before, it got to the point where it was every set. It took a while to keep calming myself down, remind myself that it's not actually a bad thing. It took some time to reset that negative association that my body had made with it.
Yeah, and that, oh man, let's play with that for a second, because that's such a wonderful example. Because when it comes to negative circumstances, you can tolerate short bursts of it. So doing one or two majorly crazy workouts a year where you drive yourself till you throw up. I'm not a doctor, so I'm not prepared to render a medical opinion on that. But as far as psychologically, it's not a big deal. It doesn't really cause wear and tear trauma. Heck, you can even do stuff for a moderately extended period, like a week or two, and probably be cool. Because the Navy SEALs have Hell Week, the Marines have the Crucible. It's not wrong to go through some pretty strenuous stuff that is really hard on you over a short burst. But yeah, if you're one of these crazy athletic trainers, and I'm sure there's more of them than I wish there were, that drives your people to puke every single freaking workout, that's a bad idea, because that's going to start doing exactly what you're talking about. You're going to start having those responses even before you have the workout. The stress of it on the nervous system, never mind the body, the rest of the body, but just the nervous system is going to be way overtaxed. Yeah, that's a wonderful example of a feedback loop that you want to avoid. Because a lot of people think you just condition yourself out of it, and what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. When in fact, it's actually the opposite. What doesn't make you stronger kills you.
Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot.
I wish that was mine. A guy said that to me 20 years ago or so, and I 100% stole it. But yeah, as soon as they said that, I was like, oh yeah, that's way closer.
Yeah. So, so what can these people start, like, what should they be looking for, and what are some things that they can start doing? Because, like, I know a big part, especially in the job situation, but in others as well. But a big part is going to be you're going to have very easy excuses for why not to make a change. You
Mm-hmm.
know, like the job fit one. I mean, right there, it's like I won't have a job slash salary. I need this money to live, so I need to just suck it up and deal with it.
Yep.
But what are the things that we can start looking at or telling, for a person to constructively either start looking to improve their circumstance or to start building their way out?
Gotcha. That is a good question. To answer it, I have to give a primer. Too much of what we're talking about is detrimental to every bodily system. So the Gottmans have done more research than anybody under the sun on couples and on love relationships. And one of the things that they discovered through their just reams and reams of research is that if we talk about love relationships, you can absolutely predict the physical health of both love partners based on the health of the love relationship. If the love relationship is unhealthy and is a negative circumstance, you will absolutely see an increase in the incidence of heart disease, high blood pressure, even cancer. So a starting point we want to talk about is when you go into these things for too long, you are basically signing up and saying, yes, I am cool if I have a heart attack earlier than I would have. I am cool with the increased risk of stroke. Now, knowing that makes some of the math much easier, because then we can start talking about mathematical risks. There's a lot of people who sign up for a job, or used to. This is much rarer now, but still certain government jobs have this. They want a really good retirement plan, so they'll sign up for a certain job for that. Now, I've worked with a couple of people where suddenly the job became horrifyingly negative, but they had a year and a half till retirement. That could be okay, because what we're really talking about is like, well, okay, if I leave now, I produce this amount of stress after retirement because I won't have this amount of money. And I mean, you can absolutely create health problems just off of lack of money too. So am I cool with, I know this is really going to marinate me in some stress response hormone and is going to create potential problems, but then once I'm out, I'm pretty okay and I'm pretty set. That might be worth a conversation of like, do I stay? But then if you're 2 years deep and you got 18 years left and you're like, wow, I have made a real mistake and this is a mess, it's much easier to do the math on, all right, do you want to marinate in this for 18 years, get to your retirement at 45 and then have a heart attack and die at 46 and a half? Mm-hmm. That becomes much more obvious. Now what I did was I kind of split it into two little more obvious ones. There's a lot of people sitting in the middle where the calculus is so much harder. But that's a good place to start. A recognition that you are absolutely impacting your physical health by staying in negative circumstances for any extended period of time whatsoever. If you know that, you at least have a starting point for deciding what you want to do.
Man, like, yeah, the calculus part is so big in these options. So let's look one piece at a time. Like overcoming, in essence, or like well, we mentioned three. The title had two: overcome or change. And then right before we started and hit the go live button, you mentioned tolerate. So let's look at tolerate first. So you're saying step one to tolerate is look at calculus, at least if you're in a more, what I'm going to say is an objective, subjective situation, like job, career.
Right.
If you are if we're talking about negative circumstances, like, we already said the second biggest one could be a love relationship. What would be a way to look at, okay, should I tolerate, yeah, I can just talk in circles all day about this. Yeah. What would be a way to tolerate, overcome, like decisions you could, mental steps you can take to decide what might be best to do next.
Mm-hmm. Well, and let's even allow for overcome for a second, because in a love relationship that has a potential. Because if the love relationship is just a mess, you have the potential to try things to fix it, or you can leave. And if you fix it, then overcome actually is fine. There's a lot of jobs you can't overcome it by changing it, because the bureaucracy is too ingrained. But a love relationship, you might be able to access the overcome option. So if we examine overcome, a good place to start is knowing that both of these things are going to have overhead. So if I leave the love relationship, and if you're married, and depending on the circumstances, a lot of people are in a position where if they leave a marriage, they're going to pay $10,000 and lose half their stuff. So, okay, so that's pretty negative. It's temporary, but it's quite negative. Versus overcome. That's going to take a different type of overhead, because the emotional investment and the emotional energy required to work on changing your side of the relationship, and therefore change the relationship, is high. The neurological energy required to create new habits and maintain them, and therefore utilize them to make different decisions, is very high. So what a lot of people accidentally do is they accidentally come up with the idea that one of these options is just easier. They're not. They're different flavors of hard. And what is best to do, if you can, I mean, God, this is such a difficult question. I'm going to say it like it's simple, but it's not, is trying to figure out which of these is actually less stressful on your own nervous system, on your own emotional state, on your own body. If there's an answer to that, then the path becomes maybe a little more clear. Now, for most people, that's not so clear. So then you got to start thinking about other things. A divorce is a quicker break with potentially quicker recovery. You can work on fixing a love relationship for 20 years and never, ever achieve it. So it's a longer term thing where you're staying in the negative circumstance with the hope of changing it. So there's a few ways to approach this. None of which I would say are like amazing. They're all, just like I said, different flavors of bad. But if you wanted to try and access overcome, and you wanted to try and say, all right, I'm going to change this love relationship, or at least try to, you might put a timer on it. Like, I'm going to do this for X amount of time. If I don't achieve some sort of result that I am looking for, then I'm going to re-explore leaving. Then you at least have a timer running where you're not going to accidentally sit in this for another 20 years. Now, is that amazing? No, it's not really all that great of a solution, but it is a solution that will get you out of the negative circumstance. And by the way, for most people, a change to the negative circumstance is better than the continuation of the one you're in. So even if you go from one crappy job to another crappy job, the change actually helps reset things a little bit, not a lot, but a little bit. Seemingly, I shouldn't say that like there's research on this. This is very difficult to research, but in my clinical experience, it seems to reset it a little bit. Same thing with a love relationship. If you go from the strategy of I'm going to overcome this and fix the love relationship, and that is stressful, and move from that to, okay, now I'm going to do a divorce, and that's a different type of stress, that does actually become less strenuous on certain aspects of the body and mind, which is not really an advertisement where I'm like, oh, well, if it goes on too long, just get divorced, because the calculus is so much more difficult than that. But just to speak in the generalities, that's one way to approach it. But I would encourage people to feel free to come up with other ways to approach it, just because I'm not the end all be all of recommendations. That a lot of my clients come up with wiser and more creative ideas than I do when I kick this question over to them. So please, if you are listening to this, Don't be scared to rely on your own methods of getting out of these circumstances or changing them, as long as you know you can't tolerate it forever. That's really the main important thing I want people to have in their head.
Yeah, there's we're I feel like we hadn't talked about it recently, but I know in the past we have like used the term calculus a lot in our chats. And I feel like that, that's one of those terms that can very easily scare people just because, possible relationships they had with high school memories. And
Yeah, I'm triggering a bunch of people right this second by saying that.
yeah. And I mean, like, so, we don't want to overshoot it. Like it is like the name implies. I mean, it is complicated, but it's more that I'm going to say actually less complicated when we speak of this calculus, like figuring out the calculus for your life. It's less complicated as a whole. It's more that it's simply complex or unique to you. And that's really the biggest thing, for listeners that we want to make sure you're getting is that every time we talk about that, we're not talking about like set rules of a right answer, wrong answer. It's just like, weighting the things that are going to be most important to you. What do you want most to happen as compared to what do you want most to avoid happening? Just those types of like honest, broken down comparisons that, like may take a while to figure out or break down, and then making the decisions that are kind of based on those.
I'm glad you brought that up because I use that term a lot, and I didn't think about the fact that I may have been accidentally implying hard, correct answers. So I'm glad you spoke to that.
I don't think you were, but again, like it never hurts to bring those things up, that there isn't like a right way. But I mean, in examples, this is also where like either having trusted people you can go to or hiring professionals can also help with, because, they can help you see perspectives that maybe you weren't thinking and find the things that end up being your correct answers to try out. So looking at like, I'm very curious about the ones who were like the people who were kind of in extremes. But before I go into that with some questions, one thought I have is, okay, what would like, well, let's talk about basically like overcoming like negative circumstances through finding a way to balance. So a thought here, like, so, okay, so these are what I'm thinking of as like just some examples, and then I know you can build on this. Like say in a love relationship, where things just maybe aren't as good as they had been before as you thought they were going to be. I mean, maybe there's even some piece like maybe the people in the relationship even have a certain belief that it's actually never going to be that way. Like almost like couples who feel like they're just going to end up living together as friends in a couple, but they're not going to break it. Maybe it's because of kids
or roommates. The roommates happens a lot.
Yes, the roommates. They feel they've been together too long. Who knows? All that stuff. Like what? Like is there like what would be some ways possibly to look at things like, okay, this is your decision at least right now, but try to balance out the negative circumstance by like taking care of yourself, making sure you got time, rules that you like you make sure you have your girls' night, your boys' night, whatever it is, things like that can help balance it. Like how well does finding a positive balance, like or positive thing for yourself, help balance the negative circumstance?
I'm glad you spoke to this because this is important to know, because there's certain negative circumstances that are either inescapable or the cost of escaping them is simply too high. I'm actually going to take it off love relationship and talk about one that happens pretty commonly. And I'm seeing a couple of people with this right now. Caregiving for an ailing parent. That's a great one because you can exit that circumstance pretty easily. Just stick them in a nursing home and forget about them. For most people, that is such a horrifying idea that the cost of that is far too much, like just way too great. Or, I mean, even the financial cost. I mean, nursing homes aren't cheap. So it just makes no sense because some part of the cost is just too great. So they decide, okay, I'm going to be a caregiver. There's no finish line on this because an ailing parent can last for 3 months to 30 years. So then what do we do to try and mitigate this? Well, you use the word balance, and that's a good word. Most people misunderstand the balance because you have to balance it by what's happening within you. And most people have very great difficulty figuring out exactly how painful a circumstance is to them. One of the reasons I talk about nervous system cost so much is because it's a little easier for people to grasp and to figure out exactly how taxing it is on them if I use it that way. So imagine for a moment, let's take our ailing parent example. You have loads of decisions to make, all of which take away some of your nervous system energy, some of your brain resources. You have the grief and pain that you are dealing with this person who is you love, presumably, and they're not doing well. You have the double grief, especially if they have dementia or some other thing that causes them to essentially have a different personality than the one you love. There's a lot of people dealing with parents with dementia, and you're basically dealing with this whole separate person remembering a person they used to be. So you got two types of grief already. That's taxing on the nervous system. And I can go on with 14 more examples, but let's just say this circumstance is massively taxing on the nervous system. Mm-hmm. Now, what most people will accidentally envision is like, oh, let me balance this out. Let me take a spa day or something. Well, yeah, okay. Let's make up some sort of measure. Let's say you're down 75 nervous system points per day dealing with this caregiving situation. And yeah, sure, you got plus 10 from the spa day that you did once. You're still at this crazy deficit. So the balance really becomes, if you're going to be in this one negative circumstance, the whole rest, if you're going to be healthy, a lot of people just choose not to be healthy because this is difficult to arrange. But if you're going to be healthy, you almost have to design the whole rest of your life to really support you, so that then you can walk into this really bad circumstance and be somewhat okay. So that means if we're going to do the parent example, when you're not with them, you got to find your job fulfilling. You got to have a love partner that's loving and on point. You got to have friends that are supportive. You got to have activities that you love. You've got to have all this other stuff that is pouring into you, just has a waterfall pouring into you, so that when you go over here and you're pouring out, you've got a ton to pour out, and you're not at a deficit. Now, that's in the ideal universe. I recognize a lot of people are in circumstances where that's not accessible to the degree we would prefer. So you just basically do as well as you can. But since you're pouring out daily, you have to be poured into daily. You can't just take an extra long nap on Saturday and pretend that that's going to get you ready to deal with this. And it can be any of these. I mean, the ailing parent, the job, the love relationship, whatever circumstance you're in that you choose not to leave or you're unable to leave, then the rest of life, to the extent possible, has to be designed around being able to support you in that continuously stressful situation.
There was a part in there that when you were talking about designing the rest of your life, that made me think, I'm just basically to add one small thing that can make a much bigger difference than people realize is, remember thinking of okay, how can I set up the rest of my life to support me or at least bring positive energy? Literally take that actually as a simple beginning step and phrase, like clutter, cleaning. When you first think about the rest of your life, literally, what are the things that just are always annoying you or around you that you can basically start trying to fix, that might take time, but is actually pretty easy. It is just, I don't know why I thought about literally your house. It's if your house is a mess and you know that it drives you insane, but you don't have the energy to deal with it, actually taking care of cleaning your house, for example, or organizing it can automatically make you kind of feel better and lift you up. And then if you keep it that way, like I said, I mean, this isn't like a PSA to suddenly go clean your houses, but I just thought about actual environment. Like, I mean, like people forget how much literally their actual environment affects how they feel every day. And so
Mhm.
if you can start getting that into a lot of people, it's literally like, yeah, cleaning, clutter, organization. But like I said, like it's your environment isn't just the big things like your people, your job, etc. Like those are of course like the bigger ones, but it's also where you are. Like
Well, but no, let's generalize that because this is that's actually really good because I was becoming conscious of the fact, all right, our podcast is like small changes to produce outsized results, and like this one really has to be about huge changes. But this is a good place to start as long as you know how to utilize this. So back to how the brain works. Human beings have a limit on the information they can process. One of the things when your place is cluttered is you are adding additional information to process. So if I just kind of like look past my camera to the rest of this room, it's pretty clean, but I see there's a few things that need put away, 2 clients worth of trauma related material that needs put away. I see some stuff over there. The more that is within my eyesight, the more that I'm draining my processing power little bits because my brain knows, oh, you need to go over there and do that. You need to go do this. You need to go do this. The more you can eliminate bits of information your brain has to process, the more you help yourself. So eliminating one thing does nothing, but if you know you have to eliminate as much as possible, that can have big outsized results. So let me give an example. And this, for those who have difficulty reaching out for help, spoiler, you're going to have to learn to reach out for help, whether paid help or otherwise. Because one of the things you can do is figure out like, all right, there's a thing that needs done. Can somebody else do this? I had my car worked on the other day, and I was having trouble figuring out where I was going to fit into my schedule. So I asked the guys like, hey, could I pay you extra to just have you come get it? Turned out the answer was yes. So now I suddenly eliminated because since I have kind of a packed, tight schedule, figuring out where to schedule something is actually informationally expensive for me because of that kind of stuff. So I basically just wrote a check and had somebody else solve that problem. Now, not everybody else has the opportunity to write a check, but you might still be able to have other people help you eliminate information processing. Because, yeah, okay, you can't pay somebody to clean your house. Can you have a friend come over and help where they do pieces of it while y'all hang out and talk? You don't have time to go to the grocery store. Can you have a friend or paid person like assist you in picking up 5 things? This really matters for the caregiver roles that we were talking about. But hey, can somebody else help do this? And the small stuff adds up a great deal because if we imagine all of it as bits of information that the brain must process, yeah, eliminating one does nothing. But if you can eliminate 30% of the information you have to process, that's massive. And it provides the brain more of a break and gives you more space to be able to function better. So yeah, the thing you're saying is absolutely true. I just wanted to expand it to figuring out how to remove bits of information you have to process. And anything you have to do, any task is information processing. Any inputs are information processing. Since it comes up literally once every podcast, the more you scroll social media, the more that's information processing, and you shouldn't do that. So,
okay. So I am going into something after this, but the fact you brought up your phone just made me think. So, like an hour, like 2 hour, like an hour and a half before we went live, I don't know. Like, our daughter had a sleepover last night with a friend was here, and they walked to the Dollar Tree, like in the neighborhood, came back, and it's funny because she's in that stage where like specific days don't necessarily mean that, like she came back, and this is Friday for anybody listening right now. It's Friday and roughly 5 days after Father's Day. And she's like, since it's Father's Day, it's like like we had a present for you, and she bought this like kind of beer like glass, and then actually goes and, by the way, like grabs a beer and pours it in, like her and her friend. This is hilarious because I barely drink. Like I actually barely drink. The fact that they did this at 10 a.m. on a Friday, amazing.
This is amazing.
Yeah, like they pour it and they give it to me, and I'm like, oh, okay. Like and but look, in the saying or the thing on this like beer glass was, "Dad, I love you more than my smartphone." I'm like, this is actually amazing.
That's a pretty big thing for somebody that age to say.
I was like, this is so cool. So yeah, bringing the smartphone up, I was like, I have to tell this story.
Yeah.
Yeah, like as far as like yeah, like starting to get rid of the clutter. So I do think, yeah, like in terms of like, yeah, handling these negative circumstances, like I'm glad we did finally come to this, is it really is one of the best first steps you can make is like you said, to just to remove that brain processing. Because we're such like everybody is living in overwhelm right now. Like the only people not living in overwhelm, I swear, are the people who have at this point purposefully removed themselves from most loops people are in society are in.
Yeah.
Like either they're living off the grid or you know, they're just living
Or they're billionaires. Like yeah, it's literally, you know, those two.
yeah, exactly. Like because otherwise there's just so much overwhelm. And it's because we always feel like we have all these things to do.
Mhm.
Well, it's both, is we feel like there's all these things to do, but then it's also because our brain, we are being bombarded by constant stimulus. Like, yeah, whether it's
Mhm.
like we're hearing things, the social media, the physical stuff. So yeah, the
The
more
ideas of what I should be, whether that's as an athlete or as a worker, as a caregiver, as a lover, you know, all the shoulds, those are inputs too.
exactly. So like when you can finally start making like real changes to that, our ability to handle things becomes so much better, clearer, and healthier at
Mhm.
that. Yeah. So,
Oh, let me say something. I don't know what it was you just said that made me think of this. Something in what you just said. Uh, One of the things too is that people, when they're in these negative circumstances, make sure to adjust down a little bit for certain things. And I'm going to use an athletic example, but you know, figure out how to apply this to any example. Uh, there's a lot of people who will imagine if they're in these negative circumstances, they should do the same workout that they were doing. Workouts are systemically and neurologically expensive. If you're expending all your neuro energy somewhere else, you're not going to be able to squat as much. It's okay to adjust those areas of your life down to not expend as much so you preserve a few things. Adjust your workouts down to walks if you have to. And you know, take the workout example and apply it to whatever, but do feel free to adjust your neurological expenditures down in other areas so you have them available in this whatever circumstance you're in. Sorry, it just suddenly occurred to me that was worth
no, yeah,
saying.
like that's a good one. Like little things people can do in different situations. Like said, like one, like, you know, regardless of which of these situations it is, you know, home. Like I said, like if you find your home stressful, like physically stressful, yeah, I said that's a good one. That's a good one for sure. Like I said, like with the organizing, with the cleaning, whatever it is. Like again, if it's work, like if it is like a business work thing, again, like if you can, like, you know, if you have the ability to delegate things, if you have the ability to put some things off for a while, or like just like not literally not deal with them, like what are little things that you're probably spending too much time and energy on that are preventing you from putting as much energy to the real important like priorities of your work responsibility, which are probably then stressing you out. um like those little things. Or even if it's, you know, like taking the time for like, this was a big one for me, ironically, like taking the time for maybe 2 weeks to like actively unsubscribe from all the freaking emails you get that are just bug you. And then
Yes.
like 2 or 3 weeks, your email inbox is actually slower and cleaner, and you're like, oh,
I might be stealing that one for next week.
It's like, oh, there you go. Like, yeah, like it's the little things like that. Like, again, like they're not going to fix, quote unquote, fix the situation, but they will give you drastically more brain power if you give it just enough time to work and build up to be
Mhm.
able to handle it and decide what to in either handle it better or decide what to do better.
Yeah. Let me add one other thing too, because this goes into prioritization. Because you were making a good point about like, okay, what are some tasks you can let go of? But then we had just given the cleaning task as like, oh, maybe this is one to not let go of. So let me give some prioritization here. Uh, Taking care of your brain and body comes number one because you live in that 24 hours a day. So if you're looking for what can I eliminate or reduce, anything related to taking care of your physical self should not be reduced overly far because you live in your brain and body 24 hours a day. Your home, you live in 8 to 16 hours a day. So it should also receive some priority if possible. The more you live in it, the less priority it should receive. So I mean, I live in my car 20 minutes a day, 30 max. Guess what's going to be the very last thing on my list? It's going to be my car. Now, if you commute in your car 2 hours a day to work, 2 hours back, maybe it gets to live a little higher on the list. But if you're trying to figure out what to prioritize so that you're expending less informational and neurological energy, that might be an okay place to start. It's not going to make it super duper easy, but at least it gives you a framework to start with.
Absolutely.
And within the home, you can even make that by room. So like when I'm at home, I live in the living room most of the time, except when I'm in the bedroom. Why should I reorganize the attic if I'm low on neurological energy? So yeah, let me give that way less priority. But if I can't stand the look of the kitchen and it bothers me every day, okay, maybe I should go ahead and let that one be prioritized. So hopefully that's a good minor model for people to utilize.
Yeah, and as we get ready to finish this off, like a little thing there too is don't forget, like we're talking about us, or we're talking about to the person, to you, but don't forget that this can also be someone else. Like if if home isn't going the way you want it to, relationship wise, and a lot of it is just simply like stress breaking things down. You may be okay with the way things are in the house, but if your loved one is upset that the place isn't very clean, and again, like it realistically wouldn't be that much of an issue for you to actually like help with it, or even surprise them like with a day with like cleaning up when they're at work or
Mm.
something. That can help them feel much more taken care of, remove the load from their plate, which then in turn you will see, again, like you being involved in that relationship will give you a positive experience in it as well.
Right. So then they can pour more into you. Yeah. This is a great example of why I use the word calculus, because sometimes it's like, okay, I do this, therefore this happens for the outsized result. But sometimes it's hard to figure out because yeah, that's a perfect example.
Yeah, like yeah, I mean that's leverage right there, things like that. So mhm.
Leverage. You may as well call it arbitrage if you're going to start getting that fancy.
All right, my man. Any finishing points you want to make?
Yes, because man, we touched on a bunch of stuff, but realistically, the thing I hope people will take away, the TLDR, is know that you cannot realistically tolerate a negative circumstance forever, no matter what our cultural narratives about that are. You really have to either escape it or change it, or else it's going to start impacting you, and impacting you in very real physical ways. So if that's your starting point, that's at least better than what a lot of people walk in, because a lot of people walk in with the imagination that they should be able to tolerate something forever, and that is wrong. And I sincerely wish that myth would go away. But if you forget literally everything else, just know that when you're in a negative circumstance, the clock is ticking and you really got to work to either change it or get out, or it will impact you in actual physical ways.
Yes, sir. All right, everybody. Thanks for listening. Again, JP and I here with you on Asymmetric Habits. Again, if you're listening live, this means you're either on Facebook, the Viking Performance Training YouTube page, or my LinkedIn page. But again, these actually do get published in podcast form, generally the week after, whenever we can. With our unofficial season 2 of releases started about a month ago. Again, so you can find them, the Asymmetric Habits podcast. They're on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. So you can check those out. Like, you can share, much easier to share that way probably than just like sharing somebody a live 50-minute video. So again, like Asymmetric Habits coming at you this way, and we're excited to get to this every single time. Hope this helps. See you guys later.
See y'all. Thanks for joining.